What is this? This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension, this Honourable Chamber was in Standing Finance Committee. To that we return.
The Standing Finance Committee resumes with Head 36, Ministry of Energy and Water Resources. We continue with the Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. I listened as it was shared by the chairman about the $1.6 billion in debt on 20 contracts. And any Barbadian hearing this, it would be excessively shocking, I believe, to them to know that that kind of money was contracted out. And I want to congratulate the chairperson on reducing it by close to $900 million, if 65% is the amount it was reduced by. That is a significant saving, because $900 million right now could do this country a lot of good in a number of areas. My main question on that was, any of that was spent on sewage, outfall, pipes, treatment plants, reservoirs, pumping equipment?
I'm going to have to ask Mr. Halliday to answer that.
Good evening, Madam Chair. In response to your question, no. Those funds were spent on a variety of other projects, community tanks, building water tankers, and such like, but none of the examples you've mentioned so far, except for a commitment to a permanent desal plant.
Because of the state in which we found those things since we came into office, I am truly stunned that none of that money was directed towards any of those critical things. And for me, it's an embarrassment as a Barbadian that Barbadians sat around a table and did this. My other question is about the water levels. I think what the Mr. Mwanza, what he shared, I found quite concerning about the level that the water has dropped to. And I wanted to inquire about what is going to be done to help the ordinary Barbadian to understand what part they must play at this point, because if I listen correctly, we don't have any guarantee that you're going to have a return to stable water patterns that you can plan by. So I want to know what is going to be done to assist us as ordinary Barbadians to conserve water and play our part in helping to ease us through this particular period we are in.
Apart from the water efficiency device programs that we were launching and a number of similar initiatives, on the educational side, certainly, from our marketing group or marketing department, we have some plans that we hope to roll out within a month or two, possibly a little later, but certainly over the next period of time. One of the things that we plan to do is to go into at least 50% of the primary schools. What we recognize is that we do need to start educating from the ground up. And while we'll be pushing the prohibition notice, and that should be made public from this weekend, and while we'll be looking to insist or push on Barbadians using water-saving devices, and generally to look at their own water security, we have realized that the area of education still seems to be lacking. And that's going to be a massive campaign that we're using. But as I said, we're going to start with the schools. Over the last year, and step up our PSAs as well, we estimate that by the end of this fiscal, for instance, we will have spent at least $700,000 in notices and PSAs, and notwithstanding the fact that we still get complaints that there's not enough information going out, there's not enough notification being placed out there. And we're looking at ways in which we can enhance this in terms of driving some of the traffic to our Facebook page, for argument's sake, or any of the other social media platforms we engage in, because through those platforms we can drive a certain agenda in terms of putting out information, in terms of sharing, for instance, what tariff rates are typically like in the region, in terms of sharing experiences on the sewage side, and particularly in terms of what's going on in the region from a water conservation standpoint and from a drought mitigation standpoint. So these are the kind of initiatives we do have. We have a marketing and communications plan that we will follow through and roll out, and those are some of the elements so far.
And one last question.
One other thing, Honourable Member. Another thing that we are going to do very shortly is sometimes it's necessary to create a context for people to fully understand. You can say what it is that you want to say. You can say as often as you want to say, but sometimes other people need to see it in reality. So once we finish with the estimates, Dr. Mwanza is organizing a trip into the Bowmanston well, into the aquifer, and we're going to invite the heads of the media houses. We actually want the people in control of the media houses who are in the decision-making positions to come and see exactly where the water supply comes from, what it looks like, where it is supposed to be, where it actually is, so they have a better understanding, in the hopes that that will perhaps spark the largest educational outreach that is not necessary. It is grassroots, effectively, right? It is not necessarily pushed by the Barbados Water Authority, but by people sharing their experiences and who are in a position to share their experiences exhaustively. And once we can accommodate it, I'm going to invite my cabinet colleagues to come as well, because it would help you to go down 200, 300, 400 feet. 260 meters? 269 feet underground and see exactly where our water comes from, see what it looks like down there, and get a full appreciation of the scale of what it is that we have to deal with. Some people have asked, why don't we dam the rivers or the streams? Why don't we dam streams in their areas? Because people see a stream that is running continuously out by them. It might be Joe's River, maybe whatever stream. But the reality is, if you see the volume of water that we're talking about, or you understand how much water is that we send down through the pipes each day, you would understand that the stream that you think is running continuously, even if we dammed it and try to harvest that water, it's a waste of time. It is not sufficient, a waste of time and money is not sufficient to make a difference. So it is important that we convey the scale of the problem that we're dealing with so that Barbadians can get a better grasp of what it is that the Water Authority is facing.
And my last question is about, I don't remember hearing how desalination might play a part in helping us get enough water, because I think, as you rightly pointed out, most everything else that we might have to do without could be an inconvenience, but water is life. And I just want to know if desalination will play a part, or how are you going to help us
Dr.
get
Bonson?
water?
Please present your least technical explanation of desal.
Yes, desalination is an option, and as you may be aware, we have utilized desalination to help us with the problems in the north in St. Lucie. We installed a small package desalination plant at Hope Plantation. So we are looking at alternative locations where we could put desalination plants. There are only two ways you can supplement the water supply in Barbados: desalination or using the treated wastewater from the sewage treatment plant. And as Dr. Sidi indicated, we are looking at both actions to be able to deal with the water supply situation.
Just one thing, Honourable Member, just to create some context, the difficulty around desalination is that it's an exceedingly energy energy intensive process. So the cost of producing desal water, seawater desal, is probably 4 times the cost of producing normal water. So if we accept that desalination has to be a part of our solution going forward, and we're looking at considering it, but the problem is we're not prepared to consider it in line with the contracts that were entered into or committed to by the last government, because even with 4 times the cost of normal water, those contracts made no sense unless there was something else there other than the contract, right? So, but I think that speaks for itself. The contracts, the 2 contracts would have together increased the cost of Barbados Water Authority by over $100 million per year. So Barbados Water Authority is catching itself trying to pay its bills. We're off of the public purse. We are receiving the contribution from the GSC. We're looking to do the renewable energy for the mains replacement. The Barbados Water Authority could not possibly find $100 million a year to do anything. Furthermore, enter into contracts that make no commercial sense. So we're looking at desalination, but it has to be desalination where the water authority is not being raped, right? It has to be desalination where it makes sense to do it and is a proper economic cost for the service that we're receiving.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is actually a follow-up from last year. Yesterday, the Honourable Minister of Sports would have mentioned that there's a push to resuscitate youth groups across the country. Now, in every single constituency, we have playing fields with lights. Last year, I would have asked the question, and this year I'm asking again. Are there any plans at all from the ministry to use solar-powered to facilitate the lighting at all of these playing fields across the country? Particularly in St. John, I know it is difficult because tokens are what, $10 for 1 token for 1 hour. And if we're looking to push sports, we're looking to resuscitate clubs, there's a need to have lighting at these locations during the course of the night. Last year, when I asked, I think the minister indicated that there was a pilot in his constituency. So I'm asking this year if plans are in train to do such across the country.
The difficulty, Honourable Member, is we looked at trying to do that project, but most of the pavilions and the like that we looked at, the roofs could not take. They were infrastructurally not ready or unable to deal with the installation of solar PVs. So even in my own constituency, I was looking at the parish land pavilion. I would love to put solar panels on the parish land pavilion, but that would be the end of that roof. So we are looking at all options. And the thing is, if you want to put solar PVs in location at the site, it is not simply a matter of putting the PVs and it helps to turn the lights on, because the PVs only generate electricity while the sun is shining when you don't need the lights. So you're actually looking at solar PVs with battery backup, or putting the solar PVs there and selling the electricity to the grid, and then offsetting the cost of your own electricity with the money that comes back. So we are looking at all options, but the biggest sticking point in relation to that was the pavilions that we looked at, the ones that were put forward, were unsuitable for the PVs. If we're planning to do that, we need to upgrade the roof structure to be able to accommodate the extra weight. So, if you have, it is one of the things we're considering. So if you have a location in mind that an engineer can certify can deal with that, then we're quite happy to see how we can get some funding, co-funding with somebody and accommodate you in that respect. But the biggest problem has been the roof stock has been unable, for the most part, to accommodate it. That's why we actually couldn't put the solar panels one time on the QEH. There was a grand plan, and we had funds allocated and a project to put a serious installation on top of the QEH, but the QEH roof could not take it at that point in time. So I am more than happy to try to see what we can do, because we keep pushing forward for projects that are of public benefit. So if you can identify a location where it can work for you, then we are quite happy to see if we can source funding to do it.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have a feeling that the Minister got a little uncomfortable when he saw me indicate I wanted to speak.
A little?
But of course, before I begin to excoriate him, Water Authority, and his team, well, I'm not going to do that. But first of all, let me thank the Minister for all of his hard work. There's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes that certainly my constituents will not be aware of. They will not be aware of the hundreds, if not thousands, of phone calls, WhatsApp messages, some with more or less colorful language depending on the level of frustration, all of which are directed at him to try to get a better deal for my constituents. I thank you and your team for your patience, and I thank you for all of your hard work so far. Of course, the human condition is such that no matter how much work you do, if the full benefit is not felt, then you may just as well have done nothing. And I represent a constituency that has been poorly served over the last few years by inability to have its garbage collected, inability to get buses to and from their homes, inability to be able to drive on proper roads, and inability to get water. I am aware that your authority has identified some solutions, and while I believe that Dr. Mansa may have touched them with a fairly glancing blow, I feel I must press for more details of the plan for water augmentation in St. Joseph. I must tell you, I'm not happy about the word augmentation. It makes it sound as though we have, and you just want to give us a little bit more. I can identify constituents immediately who have not had running water in their taps for 2 years. And I can identify individuals who have not had running water in theirs for many months. So the concept of augmentation is really not one that applies to them. What we want is what the rest of Barbados appears to have enjoyed from time immemorial, and that is a reliable supply of water. And with all that you have done, I regret to say that we have not reached that point yet. So Dr. Mansa, I'd be grateful if, for my own behalf, because I'd like an update, but also on the behalf of the constituents of St. Joseph and perhaps even St. Andrew, St. Thomas, St. John, St. Peter, and all those other hard-hit areas, if you would tell us on a step-by-step basis what are the specifics of the plan that the Water Authority is intending to roll out for our hard-hit constituents. And I must insist that, with the greatest of respect, that we get some specifics and some timelines that we could reasonably rely on. Thank you very much.
Okay, Vineyard project is intended to now I have to take into consideration the issue of using the word augmentation to add additional water, because there is some water that's being supplied in the Castle Grande system to the Castle Grande system. We have completed the designs for that system, which comprises of several elements. One element consists of building a new pumping station next to the Vineyard Reservoir in St. Philip, construction of a pipeline from Vineyard to the top of Stewart's Hill. The reservoir location is actually next to Mount Pleasant Plantation House. We have identified the piece of land that we require. We have spoken to the landowner. He has given us access to the land to a point where we actually scraped off the topsoil from the land so that we could do geotechnical tests to establish the capacity of that piece of land to withstand the weight of the 2 tanks that we're going to put there. So there will be a new pipeline that will go from Vineyard to Mount Pleasant to feed water into the 2 tanks, and we have opted to use 2 tanks, which is not the standard practice, because normally what we have done is construct 1 big tank. And when we need to maintain that creates difficulties. So what we have done is divide the capacity of the total capacity that is to be installed of 1 million into 2 tanks, so that if you have to do maintenance on one, you'll still be able to maintain supply with the other. We have also designed another pumping station which will take the water out of the 2 tanks at Mount Pleasant and pump it towards Bomerston, and from Bomerston, that water is going to go into Golden Ridge Reservoir. That will also require a pipeline that runs from Mount Pleasant through Messiah Street and into the Bomerston system. The pumps for the 2 stations have been ordered. The tanks for the two tanks have been ordered. The pipes have been ordered. We started receiving some of the pipes We have received 3 shipments so far of high-density polyethylene pipe, which is what we're going to use. In order to put in those pipes, we have to negotiate with the union an arrangement where we will use multiple private contractors to dig the trenches. And then the water authority will put in the pipe. We have an existing collective bargaining agreement with the BWU, which says any means that are not on the site. For example, if a developer is doing a housing development, the pipes within that development can be installed by the developer. Any pipes that are off-site and coming back onto the main road and connecting to our mains, those are to be done by the water authority. So on each project, when we have to vary that, we have to sit down with them and reach an agreement. We did that in 2014. Yeah, we did that in 2014, and we did it in 2006, and we have dealt with it on other projects. So we expect that once we could demonstrate to the BWU that the BWA workmen will still be fully employed and will not be displaced by assigning some of that work to private contractors, then we should have no problems. Unfortunately, we have had some financial constraints with regard to being able to pay for all the materials that we require. The estimated cost for the vineyard project is 14.8 million. When we started off doing the project, we were only supposed to provide seed money to start the project off, and then we're supposed to get a loan from the NIS. So we are working on that, and as soon as all the funds are available and with the materials that we have in place, we should be able to start some of the work as soon as possible.
I had hoped to have heard better news. I'm a little bit concerned that you now have to negotiate with the union and that you don't currently have the funding. So that I have no sense of what timeline I can reasonably say to my constituents that they could expect to get some relief. Could you tell me how long I don't want to ask you how far is Vineyard from Bowmanston, because obviously you're not doing it in a straight line. Can you tell me how many kilometers of pipe you have to lay and how long that would take in the ordinary course of things, anticipating obviously that there might be a hiccup along the way? So how many kilometers of pipe and how long that could reasonably be expected to last?
The distance from Vineyard to Bowmanston is 14 kilometers, and that work can be completed within 4 to 6 months.
Honourable Member, I'm going to ask the chair to give you a little bit more specifics as to where we are exactly with the funding and with the logistical aspect of it, because she would be in possession of more precise information.
I'm very happy for that, but I only have 3 questions. So if while the chair volunteers to speak to the chamber, for which I'm happy, I'd like to ask a follow-up question of Dr. Mansa, please, and then I can come back again. So 14 kilometers of pipe, 4 to 6 months to get it to Bowmanston. You haven't told me, perhaps because you didn't ask, how long it would take to get the 2 reservoirs installed, and also the back-end work to get pipe from wherever it is. That's Groves? It's in Phillip? Oh, it's Vineyard? Okay. So, right, Vineyard and Mount Pleasant are 2 different places. Straight to Bowmanston?
No, from Vineyard, we are coming towards 3 houses.
Right.
Follow that road that will bring you to the bottom of Mount Pleasant Hill.
And that's where the reservoirs are going?
And then we're going to go up Mount Pleasant Hill, go through the cut road in Mount Pleasant, and come in through another cut road to Mount Pleasant Plantation. So we're not coming up Stewart's Hill.
Okay. And it's at Mount Pleasant that the reservoirs will be?
Yes, next to Mount Pleasant Plantation House.
And then it's 14 kilometers to Bowmanston?
No, that's the total distance.
The total, right. But when once we get connected to Bowmanston,
yes,
is that the end of our problems, or is there no, or will there then be a need to do further works in order to resolve our issues?
That project will be able to deliver water into the Golden Ridge Reservoir. In 2016, a new pipeline was installed from Golden Ridge right up to Castle Grande. We came up through Golden Ridge, through Paris Hill, Blackmans, yes, Coffee Gully, and into Castle Grande. That was installed. So the delivery of water will then be available through that main direct to Castle Grande. What we still have to do, based on what we have encountered when we added in the additional water from Epps Hill and Trents, is that we still have to upgrade now the distribution network within the areas that are serviced by Castle Grande, so that we reduce the number of burst burns and the number of losses. And that is a package which is supposed to be funded through an EIB loan, which is about to be signed.
Thank you very much for your indulgence, Chair. I'll allow someone else to take the floor, and then I'll come again.
Chair, just well, what I will say as well is that we're not just looking at the vineyard for increased water. We're looking at increased water as well from Ionics, but we need to increase our pumping capacity that leads from the plant, because the pipes are what they are. The network is what it is. So even if we have more water in this spot available, we still have to go through the same pipes and the same pumps. So unless we increase capacity along the lines as it branches off to different places, different reservoirs, or goes into different networks, you're going to be pumping more at this end and reaching a bottleneck somewhere else, which would then create greater pressure and result in bursts. So we're actually looking at increasing the pumping capacity at St. Stephen's. So we're trying overall to get more water into the system while reducing the bursts that are likely to cause by the increased pressure.
Yes, good afternoon again, Madam Chair. We have been basically working with, as I said, the Ministry of Finance in terms of regularizing our billing and recovery system. And what we have been doing is basically using the funds as we collect them in order to facilitate the financing of the project. We have ordered, as Dr. Moanza would have indicated, a majority of the pipes and equipments that we require. We have sat with the Director of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance, and we have worked out a plan in terms of how we are going to be paying for these things as they come along. And the entire project basically we anticipate will be completed within a six-month period of time, by which time we would have made all of the payments, because it's being done in stage payments with the assistance and planning with the Ministry of Finance. And of course, with the signing of the EIB loan, we will be able to then draw down even more than just what we've been able to put together through recovering considerable amount of money that had been owed to the Barbados Water Authority. So while though not ideal to use our cash for capital projects, given the urgency of the situation, we have decided that's the way we're going to go.
Thank you. Given the time, I would kindly ask, we'll take one more member. I'll kindly ask the others to save their questions as we continue tomorrow. We'll take the question from Honourable Member for St. Lucie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me begin by first thanking the Honourable Minister and his team for the very good work they are doing in very difficult circumstances. Indeed, they have been dealt a almost unplayable hand, but I do believe, given the commitment and some of the results that we've already seen, that they are doing their very best. I have specifically two questions. We say the matter of water and the problems we're having has already been, in my view, dealt with to some extent. We have had challenges in St. Lucie as well, but I want to thank the Honourable Minister and his team for the work that they have done in that regard and that they are continuing to do. There's still some issues, but of course, you know, I believe they will be sorted out during the process of time. I speak more now from the standpoint of the Ministry of Transport Works and Maintenance. We have several complaints across the board with persons speaking about roads being dug up after their surface because of the replacement of mains, etc. And this is, the public complains very much about this. Now, I recall some time ago, some mains were ordered. I don't recall them based on what we've heard being delivered. And this in itself has affected the Water Authority from doing their particular work. I want to know basically what is the procurement system, if you're having challenges with it, what, if this has resulted in the particular area that you, in the particular situation now that you face. Because if you are unable to get the material or the pipes that you needed, if the system was not working, then it presents a challenge and it hinders us in the ministry from doing that work which Barbadians are so much looking forward to and for which they rightly deserve, as a matter of fact. So I want to hear from you, Minister, or the chairman of your board, whomever, to just explain and let us know what is happening in that regard.
Thank you, Minister. As you have quite rightly indicated, and from what I would have previously informed, there is a serious issue as it relates to procurement. We have been giving it considerable attention. As you quite rightly said, the hand that we have been dealt has been a very, very challenging hand and a very unfair hand. I wish to take the opportunity to compliment the engineering department of the Barbados Water Authority, who, in an effort to help us understand just exactly what we had in stock, they themselves went and started to do counts, in particular for the pipes as it relates to Highways 1 and Highway 7. And Highways 1 and Highway 7, to be able to get a proper understanding of just how much, what we have, and where they have, and where it is. We found a system, what I would call, of just pure chaos. Actually, thank you, Minister. Where there was no system in terms of how pipes were stored, how fittings were stored, et cetera, et cetera. And we had to take a department whose responsibility it is not, the engineering department, to sit and actually manually, the engineers, training engineers, engineering assistants, to sit down and be able to do literally a stock taking. And to tell you how confused it was, you would figure if you're going to use 10-inch pipes and 8-inch pipes or 12-inch pipes, you would pack all of them in one area. You know, everything was packed one on top of the other. So it's basically now sorting out a system whereby 10-inch pipes are placed one particular place, and it can't be in one particular area only because of transportation, given where all of our pipes and mains would be. So it is, the engineers have been assisting in developing a system that eradicates the confusion that existed and the confusion that we inherited. And once that exercise has been completed, we will be in a much better position. I received on the weekend from the Director of Engineering a full list of all of the material that we require to maintain the existing structures that we have within Barbados. And it is alarming to see that list versus what we actually have available. So it's basically trying to spread the resources, the very limited resources that we have, to cover every area possible. And this is information that was never in the public domain before. It is a task, a monumental task, to put order back into the procurement department at the Barbados Water Authority.
Thank you. And is there a time frame within which you would hope to do this in terms of the order within the procurement department, seeing that this obviously will impact on road works and other works that you may have to carry out?
As soon as possible.
Good answer.
Thank you, Minister. I have another question, though.
Last one, member.
Totally not related to water at all. In terms of energy, could you explain, Minister, some of the initiatives that your ministry is undertaking to advance the progress of the, as we move towards 2030 or deadline?
I'm going to ask the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry to tackle that one.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the question. As we move towards 2030, the ministry is engaged in a number of initiatives, recognizing that this is a transformative process that we are undertaking as we seek to move the country from fossil fuel-based towards renewables. As we started on this journey, we recognize that a number of background, a number of foundational work needed to occur first before we can build the momentum to keep going. Some of these relate to, first of all, the market structure that we have is one that it is a monopoly-based, vertical monopoly in the case of the light and power. And we're moving that to one where it is, the economists would say is a monopsony, where you have several sellers and one buyer. So in that market structure, what we're doing in the ministry is trying to determine the structures and the roles of all the players within that market to provide clarity, to provide assurance to the stakeholders that they are able to compete with the utility in the supply of their generation capacity to the grid. We have also sought to provide some clarity to investors by implementing, changing the legislation. We had an amendment to the legislation that provided for 5 licenses to the utility: generation, transmission and distribution, storage, sales, and dispatch. That sent a clear signal to the market that suggested that you as an IPP have an opportunity to play in the space of generation. Independent power producer is the acronym for IPP, that you're able to supply storage to help with the frequency variations that is part of what the renewable energy infrastructure would provide or would create. It also provided them with the opportunity to know that they can clearly enter the space for generation, because prior to 2013, when the first amendment or the first legislation was passed, the Electric Light and Power Act, one could not generate and supply or sell to the grid your electricity or your energy. That piece of legislation made it possible for individuals to do that service. So we recognize that as we move forward with this transformational process, that current piece of legislation will not take us very far. We needed to have an environment that responds to the market needs. And therefore, the ministry joined this year, and we will continue into the new financial year. We've addressed the task of developing a new piece of legislation that is currently in draft and is currently engaging the attention of stakeholders for their comments. And that we expect would replace the current Electric Light and Power Act to provide a more contemporary piece of legislation to encourage investment within the sector. It would also define the roles of the agencies, such as the ministry itself, the role of the utility, the role of the FTC, and certainly that of the independent power producers. In addition, we have been working to evolve a pricing policy, and this has been done in conjunction with the Fair Trading Commission. And what is evolving is a hybrid process, because our energy policy speaks to government's mandate to have as much local participation as possible from entrepreneurs within Barbados be able to participate in the energy space. And with that, we sought to ensure that we have greater local participation, because that would also help on the other end, where we're able to retain much more of the foreign exchange, notwithstanding what we have to use to purchase the inputs for the renewable energy systems. We are able to retain more of the foreign exchange, because then most of the profits would stay within as opposed to going out, which is what is the current situation. So we're hoping to change the ratio of that investment, where we're able to unlock some of the savings that currently resides within our local banking community for investments within the energy sector. We're also improving the licensing regime generally that speaks to solar and the other technologies such as wind, because at this point, we have none of those systems, no wind turbines at this point, onto the grid supplying energy. The Light and Power just recently supplied its application for the insertion of a 10-megawatt wind farm, and that is currently engaging the attention of the ministry. As we also move forward, we recognize that we have been able, through small steps, to be able to put 28 megawatts of renewable energy systems, including the 10 megawatt, in addition to 10 megawatts from the utility. So we currently have 38 megawatts of renewable energy capacity onto the grid. We recognize that as we move to 2030, we need to improve the insertion, and we have to do larger amounts. And therefore, part of the work that we have been doing also looks at how we can send a signal to the market that says this amount of capacity is needed, and therefore there's a competitive process for the procurement of that capacity for installation onto the grid. Many of the initiatives has to be done simultaneously because the time frame, we don't have a long time frame to get to 2030. We now have about 9 years or so remaining. And therefore, we have to collectively undertake a number of the foundational work simultaneously so that we are able to bring clarity to the market. We are able to bring some level of assurances to invite both local participation as well as foreign direct investment to the energy space. So that provides a summary of some of the initiatives that we've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairperson, I move that you now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and to beg leave to sit again.
Question is, I now report to the Honourable Speaker progress and ask for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee has reported progress and asks for leave to sit again. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Your Honour the Speaker, I beg to move that this House be suspended until tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
The question is that this Honourable Chairman be suspended until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands suspended until 10 a.m. tomorrow in the forenoon.